الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, after the Sunnah, we'll have the Islam 201 class. We'll cover the latest in Gaza and Lebanon and the attack from Iran on Israel and the possible response. And this will be, inshallah, in about 5-6 minutes. Let me, inshallah, also say that we really like the kids to come to the masjid. They are our future. What we would like really to say is that the parents, if you bring an infant, keep him or her next to you, and if they cry, carry them. Carry them, and your salah is still valid, no problem. If they are 5 and 6, please train them to sit or stand in the line next to you, inshallah. And then they will have plenty of time to play. We'll see you in a few minutes, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين. الحمد لله، الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم اجعلنا منهم آمين. Inshallah, this evening we'll cover together the latest events, mainly in Lebanon, and then what's going on in Gaza, and the attack of Iran on Israel and the expected response. So we'll try, inshallah, to take them together. But let me start by reminding you that today is October 6, and tomorrow is October 7. October 6 is a day in 1973 when Egypt and Syria initiated an attack on Israel. And October 7, as all of you are aware, is last year's when Mujahideen from Gaza, mainly led by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, start an attack on the military bases and military points and the settlements around Gaza. So those two occasions are very important, although with great differences between them. Let me explain a term before I proceed. When I talk about a limited war, or limited response, or a measured response, what's meant by that is one party or two parties or more attack each other, but it's not an all-out war. It's limited in its scope, it's limited in its damage, it's limited in its consequences and objectives, militarily and otherwise, economically, what have you. So let me give you examples, because this term is very important today to understand what we will be talking about. When US was in Vietnam, it was a clear all-out war. The US tried its best to wipe out the Vietnamese resistance. And the Vietnamese resistance tried their best to kill as many Americans and make the price high for the American in Vietnam. So we do not call this a limited or measured response. It's an all-out war in this regard. And the US, of course, could not take the losses. Eventually, they had to escape, a humiliating escape from Vietnam. Same thing when the war broke between Iraq and Iran. For 8 years, it was an all-out war. Everyone is trying its best to really decimate the other and take over the other's land and army and so on and so forth. A contemporary all-out war is what's going on between Ukraine and Russia. Russia initially tried to take over Kiev, the capital, and they wanted really to get rid of the regime that is pro-US and the West. But they could not. So the war is still ongoing. And each one tried to really hurt the other in a fashion that will bring the war to either a peaceful settlement that both will agree on. That's why each one is trying to strengthen their position in the war. Of course, the West is telling us Ukraine is winning, and Ukraine is really losing bad. And many people in Ukraine within the army and their families are getting sick and tired of the war. That's why Ukraine is suffering and they may give up. Although the West is pumping tons of money in there. So one party will keep fighting until either it gets wins or it's not able to continue the war. Russia, of course, will keep fighting for not this, I mean, this is not the subject today, but Ukraine may cave in because of their losses, and they do not have enough men to come and fight. So those are all-out wars. What are limited or measured responses? Limited or measured responses, like when Iran at one point and the Iranian groups in Iraq have attacked US bases. So this was a measured attack. The US will respond with measured responses. It does not aim at, let me start a whole out war with Iran. So they may just bomb certain place or kill an important person like Soleimani. So for the past 20 plus years, there was this limited war, if we can call it war, between Israel and Iran. Measured. So Iran has at one point attacked an Israeli ship. The Israelis killed so many of their scientists, nuclear scientists, over the years. Israel killed Haniya in the middle of Tehran. Israel will respond, but the US told them, if you do not respond to Haniya's killing, we will have a ceasefire in Gaza. This is what the president of Iran said on Friday or Saturday of this week. He said, we did not respond to Haniya's killing because the US and Europe offered us that we will have a ceasefire in Gaza. Because even if they want to respond, it will be a measured response. But the US is telling them, no, no, don't respond, we'll have a ceasefire. And he said they lied to us. This was Friday. Now, Netanyahu came out talking to the Iranian people and telling them in no time the Iranian regime will be finished. The Iranian regime will be finished. He said even before you can comprehend it, before even you are expectation of it, the regime will be finished. And of course, after the killings of many of the leaders of Hezbollah that we discussed last Sunday, the Israelis were in a mode of euphoria, dancing. You know, October 7 is coming and, you know, we'll be happy to what had happened. We will not mourn the October 7 and this and that. And this is again what we talked about last week, that there was this shift that the government felt they cannot achieve any objective in Gaza. The three objectives that they put together, finishing Hamas, they could not finish Hamas, and the US says Hamas is still strong. This is the US saying Hamas is still strong in Gaza. And we're going to bring the hostages home. They did not bring the hostages home. There are still more than 100 in Gaza. And thirdly, de-radicalize Gaza. And so far, none of that have taken place. So they shifted the war to the north, and they started killing the leadership of Hezbollah in this regard. Now, the last killing in Beirut have included the head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, and two top Iranian officials. One of them was the emissary of Khamenei to Nasrallah, and the other is the head, at least this is what the news in the last 36 hours said, that the heads of Quds force was also killed. And with this, Iran decided to bomb Israel. but again, in a measured way. So it was not war declaration. Europeans and Americans were aware that this attack would take place. So on that morning, the US, of course, already informed the Israelis and went further. They talked to the international media and they said there will be an Israeli attack later today. I mean, this was in the media. You can read it, in the Israeli media and others, that there is an attack coming. And indeed, by the afternoon, evening time there, about 200 projectiles. Some of them are precise missiles, some of them are not that precise. The ones that are not precise, it's like plus or minus 150 meters or so. Because I know 2 of them have fallen in areas that I know very, very well. One of them the target was the Justice Ministry in Jerusalem. And the missile fell in front of the St. George Hotel. Between them is about 100 meters. And another missile fell in my own hometown in an open area, which is about 100 meters or so from a military headquarters, Israeli military headquarters in our hometown. So those are the type of missiles that are not precise. But there were a number of those missiles, they were precise, meaning it's a plus or minus a meter or 2. This is my numbers. So basically, those that were sent to military bases were from those precise missiles. And they hit and they made destruction. There's another missile that hit at the time. This was coming from Yemen, by the way. All those that I talked about coming from Iran. A missile was coming from Yemen. Also, when Netanyahu was arriving the day before, the Yemenis sent a missile that hit in front of the terminal where we go unload our luggage and get the bags on the wagons. So yeah, some of those missiles, as I said, are more precise. But again, it's limited measured action. And the Iranians already informed the West so that the Israelis are aware. This is not the whole war. There's no need for you to respond at this point. Later on, we can see what you want to do in this regard. And that's exactly what had happened. The bulk of the Israelis went underground, including Netanyahu, who ran for his life. Although the day before he was in Tel Aviv bragging. He was bragging, walking in Tel Aviv, and suddenly 24 hours he was running underground. And what is interesting is that the people of Palestine and Jordan, almost the bulk of them were on the roofs of their houses cheering the missiles, knowing that some of them may miss, but they did not really care. A brother that I was chatting with from Jerusalem, he said, Brother Hisham, all Jerusalem Muslims and Christians are on the top of their homes, and the Israelis are underground in this regard. So it really created this, again, euphoria among who? Among the Palestinians. And they saw in it, and they saw all those projectiles coming and explosions. They heard the explosions, and they saw all of this. And as I said, it was cheering all over the place. But again, everybody's aware this is a limited action. And Iran announced that this was, again, because of the assassination of Haniya, Nasrallah, and the emissary of Khamenei to Hezbollah, to meet with Nasrallah. They made it clear in that regard. And they said the typical thing. If Israel will respond, we will do, and we will do. Now, what is expected, of course, is for the Israelis to respond. That's something that you can count on. They have to respond. They have no choice. They have to respond. Because with this limited war, it has to do with the country's dignity, reputation, the way that its own people see it, and so on and so forth. It's standing among other countries in the area. You know, the Saudis and the Emiratis, the loved ones for the Zionists, will be looking, yeah, let's see what you're going to do. You know, encourage, and let's see what you're going to do. Because basically, they have depended all along. They thought that Israel at one point will finish Iran for them. Unfortunately, the Arabs are asleep, waiting for the Israelis to finish Iran for them. So the Israelis have to respond. Now, enter into this field the US. So Biden and company would meet with the Israelis and said, let's discuss the targets. So from day one, Biden and the administration tell the Israelis, nuclear sites are off limits. Don't. If you attack nuclear sites, you are on your own. We will not support you. And we know for the last 20 years or so, Netanyahu kept encouraging US presidents to attack Iran, or to attack Iran with the Israelis together. And every US president told them, no, no, no. In fact, when the US wanted to assassinate Soleimani, who was assassinated in Iraq, Trump said publicly that it was a joint operation between us and the Israelis, and in the last minute the Israelis said we are not part of it. They withdrew themselves. Now the Israelis know that they can attack Gaza for the next 20 years and they will only need US weapons. They do not need US to help in the attack. Same thing, they can attack Yemen, they can attack Syria, they attack Lebanon, they can attack Jordan, in fact even they can attack Egypt on their own, and they do not really need from the US other than the weapons and money. But they cannot attack Iran or Turkey or Pakistan without the direct help of the US. That's the difference in the equation. So when they want to attack Iran, they have to consult with the US. So the US suggested to them, why don't you attack oil fields? I mean, this is in public. There's nothing secret about it in this regard. And a former prime minister was in the Hebrew press saying basically, Israel will attack the oil fields or the oil production or the refineries, so it's oil related. Jump in Donald Trump. So he told the Israelis, no, attack the nuclear sites and then think about the rest. Of course, if he's in real position, he would not say such a thing. But he won again some votes among the Jews that he is tough on Iran. Attack the nuclear sites and then we'll leave the rest for later. Now, Israel knows very well if it starts a real attack on the nuclear sites in Iran, Iran will start bombing. I mean, they have, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of missiles. Some of them are very precise, and they are able to destroy Israel. And by that time, Israel will destroy Iran, so it's a mutual suicide. And neither Iran nor the Israelis want mutual suicide. So that's why the hit is, whatever attack will be measured. But the attack is coming. Now, the last thing that came in this regard today, not sure if you have seen it because it was later on today, that the US is saying to the Israelis the same game they played with Iran. When Iran, when Haniya was killed in Tehran, as you know, the president of Iran came last week and said they told us, don't respond this measured response, and we will have ceasefire in Gaza. They did. They weren't lying. Now the U.S. is telling the Israelis today, don't respond to Iran, and we will give you weapons and money, and put political pressure and sanctions on Iran. The Israelis will not accept this. Because again, it will be looked as a weakness. Just like when, you know, the whole world was watching Iran. How in the world this, you know, guest of yours, Haniya, the head of Hamas, visiting you in Tehran and being assassinated by the Jews in Tehran, and you did not do anything? Not just that. The first leader in Hezbollah, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, in 3 weeks, about 10 of big names within Hezbollah were assassinated. Of course, that's another issue. Hezbollah has been infiltrated deeply by the Zionists. And the pagers and the walkie-talkie were another proof. And reaching to Hezbollah headquarters and Hassan Nasrallah and the Iranian, you know, envoy of Khamenei to Nasrallah together, and now the head of the Quds brigade in Iran is just, okay, what is it that you are waiting for? Why you are not responding? And Iran, again, found that they had to respond after the president saying they told us and it was a lie. So from this perspective, Israel will not. Yeah, they may take the weapons and the money and still attack, a limited attack. So that's the story of the attack on Israel and then the expected response from Israel on Iran. Shifting to Gaza, really what has been happening is killing every day. So the genocide is still continuing in this regard, but because of the media shift toward Lebanon, not much unless you search for the news on what's happening in Gaza. You know, they keep asking people to go from one area to the other, leave this area. And what is happening, this is in the Israeli press in the past 2-3 days, you could see it, is that actually whenever they leave a place, Hamas come back to the state and in control. So they call it, you know, re-entering this area or that area, and this is happening in this regard. Of course, the bulk of the army now shifted to the north in this regard, so there's not as many divisions in Gaza as before. So the situation in Gaza is really, will be on this, you know, if you can call it back burner for the Israelis until they decide what to do with the north. Now, what happens in the north? Last week, when we finished, we said Hezbollah is in front of two decisions. Either they will respond with all this assassination of their leadership, you know, from Shukr to Hezbollah to Nasrallah to this you know, envoy from Iran, among others. About 10 of their top leaders, Radwan force, were wiped out. So either they will declare whole war and start, you know, attacking and with using the real missiles that they hide. They have about 150,000 missiles. Some of them are precise, as the ones that Iran have used and the Yemenis have used. And many of them are in between this ability and what Hamas uses in Gaza. Or they will absorb this attack and continue the limited engagement. Right? That's what we ended last week. But by the next day, the Israelis did not leave Hamas to choose. I'm sorry. The Israelis did not leave Hezbollah to make a choice. They decided to start a limited invasion to the north. There is what we call it's called the blue line between Lebanon and Israel that goes east to west. And there is a green line that is the line in 1948 that was between the Palestine and the Israel. That was the division of the United Nations. So the green line is where on the left of it, the bulk of the so-called Arabs of 1948 live who have Israeli citizenship. So don't confuse the green line with the blue line. So now the Israelis saying we want to push Hezbollah, this is according to their foreign minister, to the Litani River. Litani River is about 30 miles from the borders of Lebanon with Israel. And we will stop the war if they get beyond Litani and disarm. And they know very sure, they know very well that Hezbollah will not agree to disarm. There may be some kind of an agreement that will put Hezbollah beyond the Litani River. That's possible. That's possible and feasible and can be done. If the price of the war on Hezbollah became high. I mean, remember, just like what we talked earlier on Vietnam, I mean, the US can't keep bombing Vietnam for 50 years. But the moment that the US cannot take more casualties, the war is finished. They have to withdraw. They lost. Same thing with Russia and Ukraine. The moment that the Ukrainians get to the point where there is not willing among its people to keep fighting, Ukraine have to say, okay, let's talk. What do you need? Oh, we need the Crimea, and we need this section, and Donbass, and this section. Okay, you can have it. Let's have a peace agreement. Similarly here, the Israelis know that they cannot continue the war with Lebanon, with Hezbollah for a long time. They know that. Because it is costly from many aspects. One aspect is the military one. You have seen the first day when they tried to send the troops in southern Lebanon, Hezbollah killed 8 of them and 40, to be precise, 39 soldiers injured, some of them seriously, made it to the one hospital, which means others went to other hospitals. But this is what the Israelis admitted to. They admitted to 8 soldiers killed, 3 officers among them, and 39 injured. Although the hospital said one hospital said we get 39. Now, we would not expect the Israelis to tell the truth in this regard, because we know during the Iranian attack, they issue orders. No one is to make videos and put them online. And they kept saying the attack did not achieve anything. There is no human loss. There is not much, loss in structure or military bases. It turned out when the satellite showed that there was big damage in military bases. There was big damage. Even the Israeli press eventually, they came along and said there was damage was done serious to military bases in this regard. So from the first encounter with Hezbollah, having 8 killed and at least 8 killed and 39 injured, it's clear that there will be a price. There will be a price. For how long would the Israeli government and the army take the losses and fight? I think it's not for long. Why? First of all, the Israelis have been engaged in a war for the last year. And the Israelis are never plan for or do well in a war that lasts more than few days or few weeks. That's their way of doing things. That's their way of doing things. In the October 6, 1973, when the Arab countries, Egypt and Syria started the war, again, that was a limited war. It was not an all-out war. Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. And the Prime Minister of Jordan at that time, he said that this war is حرب تحرير حرب تحريك حرب تحريك لا حرب تحرير. This is not a war of liberation. This is a war to move the peace process forward. And indeed, after this, within a few years, Sadat went to Jerusalem and Camp David agreement took place, and Henry Kissinger started going between the Syrians and the Israelis for a peace agreement. حرب تحريك لا حرب تحرير. A limited war meant to get the peace process working, not to liberate Palestine. So Egypt took Sinai and they made the peace agreement with the Israelis, the Camp David peace agreement. In this case, this war would last a few weeks. It can't last for 6 months and 4 months and 5 months. It can't. For the following reason, as I said, first of all, the military cost. Now you have 300,000 soldiers who are not regular soldiers. They are reserved. They are called for war. Those people would expect in the past wars, for example, in 2014 with the attack on Gaza, or in 2006 with Hezbollah, or in 1973, you called those troops for a month or two, a week or two, but they have been fighting for a year. And tomorrow it will go beyond, and the day after tomorrow it go beyond, and then the days will go by and suddenly the army is exhausted and more people will say, we are not going to go to fight. There's a limited number of soldiers who refuse to go to Gaza in this regard. So the cost on the military, they keep those bombs. They said that 81,000, the number at one point that the US sent them 81,000 of those pounds of those special bombs. Not to mention all the other equipment. Just on the Beirut last week, 80 tons in one instant were used. 80 tons of bomb were used in one instance. So for how long they can sustain this militarily, it's clear not for very long. Secondly, the economic part. The Israeli economy is suffering because basically those 300,000 reserve troops, where did they come from? They came from businesses, they came from high-tech companies. Imagine Israel before the war, 35% of their tax income, the country, their tax income, 35% come from high-tech companies. 35%. That's huge. And the people who are working in high-tech now, they are fighting in Lebanon and in Gaza. Another big impact on the country's economy was the startups. Many of you use WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp was an Israeli startup that eventually Facebook bought and paid big money for it. There are many startups that are there with the help of many US companies and the army establishment, those, spying devices and this and this and that. Now, billions of dollars that foreigners have put in those startups are being taken out because they no longer trust the safety, and the future of those startups. So half of the startups, they're saying, are dead. This is what the official numbers, although it's more than that. Fruits, vegetables, plants that the Israelis have been, using internally and exporting, some, they cannot even find people to cultivate them. I mean, when I was in Palestine, only 2.5 weeks ago or so, kilo of tomato was 12 shekels. It was 2 shekels before. Kilo is about 2 pounds. 2 pounds. It used to be, 2 shekels. Can someone get the chair to the doctor, please? So before he got it, Jazakallah, he got it. So before this thing, tomato is used commonly by the Jews and the Palestinians. So imagine to go from 2 shekels to 12, because the Israeli tomato is rotten in the field. No one will cultivate it. You get 200,000 Palestinians who used to go and work in the fields and in construction. No more. They are considering bringing people from India and Thailand and others, but people are hesitant given the war and the situation. This past week, S&P have downgraded their credit. Another, Moody downgraded the week before their outlook and their confidence. They lower it by 2 notches. They have been borrowing like crazy to support the army, the war effort, and to support the Haredim to keep the government together. Basically, the Haredim are hundreds of thousands who are not willing to go to war, and they are not willing to work. They just study the Talmud, and they said because of our studies, religious studies, God is supporting Israel. And they are big chunk of the government, so they keep giving them money. Although the opposition have objected, and in fact the court have got involved. At one point they put a limit. They said whoever from the Haredim does not come to the war in that age, we will not give them child support. We will not give them basically they go to study, their women go to work, and they have to find places for their children. The government said we no longer will pay for it. Suddenly, threatening the government that if we do not get with this, suddenly they go around it and they said, we'll still pay for it. So economic-wise, there's real issue that are facing. Thirdly, how long the people, the Israelis themselves, how long that they can take this? Because what is happening now is the bulk of the young men and women are thinking of leaving. They do not look for a future there. The elders and the Haredim, who, as I said, they do not work, they just study the Talmud and the Torah, and the government give them money. They said those people are solid. They are not leaving. They said, we are here to stay. Unless they're going to force them to go to the war, to go to the army, they said, we will leave the country. So this issue within the population is also as a result of the war. Now talk about the international community. How do they view those Zionists? Only a few years back, the special assistant to Netanyahu, who used to travel with Netanyahu all over the world, he used to say, wherever we go to a country, we'll discuss briefly relationship between Israel and that country, and then the bulk of the time, the leaders are talking to Netanyahu to be in between them and the US and Congress to try to get something from the Americans. Well, the situation is no longer that case. I mean, we have seen even Macron, who have not hid all those years where to stand from the Muslims and the Arabs. Macron, yesterday calling for arms embargo in Israel. For all those weapons that are used in Gaza, he said we have to have an arms embargo. Now remember, for a year, the genocide has been going on Gaza, and Macron did not see a need for an arms embargo on the Zionists. Now Lebanon is being attacked, and if you remember from last week, we talked in details that the French still think that they have influence in Lebanon. They still think they have an influence in Lebanon. And their influence is limited with the Kata'ib, the Phalangists, the right-wing Maronites, Christians. They do not have real influence. But being attacked Lebanon, and France cannot do anything in this regard, suddenly he's calling for an arms embargo. But this is significant. And this got Netanyahu and leadership in Israel to go berserk. I mean, Netanyahu went public, shaming him and said, shame on you. Now you guys are against Israel. You are attacking Israel. You are this, you are that. And we know many countries around the world either considered accepting a concept of a Palestinian state, or some of them already recognize a Palestinian state. And we know the government of Israel, they did, as a result, build so many settlements in response. And they said, whenever a country recognizes a Palestinian state, we will build more settlements. So in this regard, on the international arena, they are also losing support. I mean, imagine their brethren in United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed, they surprised the world last week. Those who have been supporting the Zionists, Mohammed bin Zayed, all along, and then Mohammed bin Salman joining, supporting the Zionists against Hamas. The world was surprised that the UAE take a stand and start talking about Israel in a negative fashion, and calling for countries to get together and this and this and that against Israel. Same thing Ibn Salman sent this Ibn Farhan, the foreign minister, and said we need to gather the countries together to establish a Palestinian state. And Allah knows they are liars. هم العدو فاحذرهم. They are just liars, plain liars. Because with all this attack on Gaza, all this attack on Lebanon, they have to say something. Remember, just 2 months ago or so, Netanyahu was saying that the Emirati will take care of security after we leave Gaza. And they will be leading this effort, others will join. And of course, he put the Emirati in a corner. The Emiratis said, no, we are not doing it. You already agreed. They already agreed behind the closed doors that the Emiratis will take a lead. And Netanyahu could not be patient, because the US is pressuring him. What's after Gaza? What's the day after? He came out and said, the UAE have agreed to take the lead in terms of security in Gaza. And the UAE has no choice but to come out and said, no, we are not doing it. Although in private they agree to it. So this is again on the diplomatic level. Talk about Jordan. You know, the Hashemite families are the one who gave up Palestine to the Jews without a fight in 1967. The whole Palestine was given. The 1967 war, the whole of what was under Jordan was given to the Israelis without a fight. There were 2 units of the Jordanian army that refused the army order to withdraw to the Jordan River, meaning give it to the Israelis. In Jerusalem, and there was another segment in Al-Latron, and both they kept fighting until all of them attained Shahada. But those were defying the orders of the king Hussein. So the Hashemites have sold Jordan. Now, why King Abdullah is upset with the Israelis? Because now the right-wingers in Israel saying, let's get the West Bank Palestinians out and go into Jordan. And that has upset the king and the government. And the second thing in this regard, some of those Israelis are saying now Lebanon, the next stop will be Jordan. This explains to you why the king gave this strong speech at the UN, which is not their typical. You know, they're typical about peace and love and this and that. Because again, they are closer to the Yahud, to the Zionists than to the Muslims. Again, هم العدو فاحذرهم. But now, with what the Israelis is doing, this is becoming, and there are other aspects in this regard, but mainly political, economic, and military in this regard, and hopefully the more and more from the young people will immigrate and leave Palestine from this perspective. Let me just mention one thing, inshallah, and then we'll open it for a question and answer, since last time we did not have the time. Emails have been revealed. Emails have been revealed that there was an exchange of email between the State Department and the White House after the war started in Gaza, where the State Department was telling the White House that Israel, we suspect that the Israelis are committing war crimes in Gaza. This was from the first few days of the war. You remember when Gallant stood and says about people in Gaza, they are human animals? You remember when he stood and said, no food, no fuel, no medicine will get to Gaza? So the State Department was warning the White House, Israel is in the process or already committing war crimes in Gaza. Let's not talk about month 2 and month 3 and 4th month and today, from the beginning of the war. So the White House was well aware that Israel is committing war crimes. They were well aware of it. They did not need the International Court of Justice to come and say this. They did not need to wait for the ICC to issue orders waiting to be implemented to arrest Netanyahu and Gallant for war crimes. From the beginning, the US was aware that the Israelis are committing war crime. And they were supporting them. All along, supporting them. All along, supporting them with weapons and money. And they have been getting an insult after an insult and after an insult from Netanyahu, and still doing the same. Inshallah, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Jazakumullahu khair. And may Allah bring the khair and the good for the ummah and elevate the suffering, inshallah. Any question? Yes, Muhammad. How do we see this ending? Nothing of value will happen before the US election. So this thing will be dragged until the US election, because Netanyahu is counting on Trump to win the war, and he's doing certain steps toward this effect. So nothing will happen until then. After the US election, the Israelis will make up their mind of which way to go. But I do not see this war, we talked about this about 6 or 7 months ago, that they're going to drag it until the election. Now, after the election, I would say give it a few months and things in Lebanon and Gaza will come to, some kind of an agreement. in this regard. What will be the situation with the Israelis and the Lebanese then? That remains to be seen. Here, there is a question, in fact, that I kept hearing and discussion about where we stand from Hezbollah now. The Saudi and the Emiratis and company, they have been spreading all these things. In fact, even the Israelis, they have spreading this. Those are Shiite, and the Sunni need to be aware. This guy, the Israeli army, a spokesman in Arabic, he in fact quoted Muhammad ibn al-Wahhab, quoted Ibn Taymiyyah, quoted Yusuf al-Qardawi. So this Khabith Jew is telling the Arab Sunnah that the Shiite are more dangerous to you than the Christian and the Jews. This Jewish guy is telling the Arab Sunnah that the Shiite are more dangerous on you than this. Yes, we know, and we will not forget the atrocities that happened to the Sunnah in Syria. But where are your brains? Where are your minds? Nobody is standing to the Zionists now except the Hezbollah and company. And at this point, they are not standing for Palestine. Again, I say it publicly, hear me. Iran and Hezbollah are not interested as a first priority in liberating Palestine. That's for sure. Lebanon and Hezbollah, this is not their first priority to liberate Palestine. It was never before, it's not the case now. However, Iran and Israel have big problems between them. And because of Iran's interest, they have established bases to make problems for the Israelis. Since they are the one who are bombing the Zionists, the one who are fighting the Zionists, the one who are killing the Zionists, what is your choice? The so-called Sunni Arabs. What's your choice? King Salman and Muhammad bin Salman and Muhammad bin Zayed and Sisi and King Abdullah and Muhammad of Morocco, they are the real enemies. Please, where are your minds? Those who are saying we should put all the fight now against Iran and then we liberate Palestine. I mean, what kind of stupidity is this? ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. استغفر أذان إن شاء الله. I am emotional in this regard, so forgive me. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.